The Google Display Network lets you reach a huge amount of users, whether they're browsing the web, engaging in an app, or on one of Google's owned properties like YouTube or Gmail. There are lots of different ways we can reach those users, either through audiences or contextual targets. So today I want to go through all of the targeting options available for the Google Display Network, tell you how each of them works, and give you some examples of how you can use them to reach your target audience. I've gone ahead and created a placeholder display network campaign in Google. I did not choose any objectives, and I chose standard display campaign so we could see the most targeting options available while going through this demo. For the most part, all of the targeting options live at the ad group level in Google. The only one that adjusts at the campaign level is going to be location. And we do have another video that you can check out in the top of the screen right now that shows you all of the different Google Ads location targets. For now, I'm going to leave this example as United States and scroll all the way down to ad groups so we can get started on those targeting options. Once we're down at the ad group level, the first thing it's going to ask us to do is to give it a name. I'm just going to leave it as ad group 1 for the sake of this example, but then it's going to start jumping us into the targeting options. And the first thing I want to do is close this audiences browser, because I want to show you the two key buckets of how we're going to target users on the GDN. And the first is going to be based on people, who you want to reach. We're trying to think about the audience and the user on the other side of the computer more than anything. So these are always going to be options that are based on the user that you're trying to reach. The second targeting type, which we'll go through at the second portion of this video, is going to be around content. And that's where you want your ads to show. So rather than thinking about the person who's using the computer, think about what types of websites or apps they're visiting on the Google Display Network. We're going to start off going through audiences. I'm just going to go pretty much in order down the screen. So let's open this back up and jump into the different targeting options that we have for people. When you first create a campaign, the audiences section is going to default to a number of different suggestions that it has available just based on what you've done in your account already. You can utilize these if this is a good list and you want to run with it. But for now, to go through all of the different options, I'm going to come over here to browse so we can see everything that's available. You'll see here that the list that shows up is going to break down users in a number of different ways and how you can reach them. So depending on how familiar you are with display network targeting, you can utilize the short sentence that Google has at the top. Who are they? What their interests and habits are, what they're actively researching or planning, or you can utilize the text in the parentheses, which is going to be the types of targeting options that we as marketers will most likely refer to. So detailed demographics, affinity audiences, in-market audiences, life events, those sorts of things. So there are two different ways that they have kind of the naming together, and those sentences at the top will help explain how we're reaching users. This first set, I'm actually going to go a little bit out of order because you can see here that there are detailed demographics around who they are, but then down below there's also demographic information. There are differences between these. Some of them overlap a little bit, but overall they're going to reach two different groups of people. So first I want to open up this demographics box. When I scroll down, you can see that these are pretty basic sets of demographics based on somebody's gender, age, parental status, and household income. You can see down at the bottom, there's a little note that says household income targeting is only available in select countries. So if you're in one of the countries that has it, your list will likely look like this. But if you're in a country that does not, you'll probably still only see gender, age, and parental status. If any of these you want to target, let's say we just want to target parents, you can uncheck the box next to not a parent to make sure that you're targeting people who are designated as parents or unknown. And every one of these categories is going to have unknown because as much information as Google knows about us, there are some times where they simply don't know what the user's age is, what the household income is, whether they're a parent or not, usually based on how new they are to the platform, what information they've given in their profile, and if they're logged in or not when they're browsing the web. The biggest thing is that you need to be careful with demographics because there are some rules and regulations in place with digital advertising to make sure that there's an equal opportunity for all users. So just be a little bit careful with demographic information, but this does help you start to narrow down based on the most fundamental versions of the user, how you want to target them and who you want to get in front of. For now, I'm just going to check the box again, and then we'll close this and just say done. Because I want to scroll up here and talk about the difference of detailed demographics. So if we open this up, you'll see that there are different high-level settings here. parental status, marital status, education, and homeownership status. Each of these will also have a checkbox next to it, but there are just going to be a few different breakdowns within each of these. Homeownership status lets you target whether they own their home or they rent, and there are going to be some descriptions next to it if that's a little bit more helpful. People who own the home or apartment they live in but may still have mortgages. So it doesn't necessarily mean you've paid that thing off, but you own wherever you live. Renters obviously will be the people who rent the place that they live. Each of these different options has some other breakdowns available. Education, you can either target people who are current college students, or you can target them based on the highest level of education attained. So they've got things for high school graduate, bachelor's degree, and advanced degree. So it's not the most robust set of targeting, but it is something to kind of lean into different levels of education if you need to. The last one I want to look at is parental status, because as you'll remember, that overlaps with the demographic targeting. We did have a parental status there, but the detailed demographics goes a little bit further. We can break down into parental status, parents. There's not a no parent option or targeting somebody with no kids. But when we open this up, we can see that the lists are actual further breakdowns of users who are parents. Now we can target people who are parents of infants, toddlers, preschool, grade schoolers, or teens. So if there does need to be some segmentation within the parental status, if you're trying to target new parents to sell them either infant clothes or diapers or something along those lines, probably makes sense to make sure that you're checking the right box here and you're not targeting parents of teens, because unless something has gone wrong, those users shouldn't need those types of things. So that wraps up the demographics section. Now let's start to look at some of the other targeting options that we have available through Google. The next is going to be around what users' interests are, and these are going to be what we call affinity audiences on the Google Display Network. Think of these as very broad types of targeting, almost as if you were going to target users on TV. That was one of the different ways that Google tried to explain it to users when these first came out. And I think that that still holds because they are relatively broad. So if we open this up, these will also be based on a drop-down list. So we can see banking and finance is the first option here. Sounds relatively specific, but if you open it up, there's only one subsection of this, and that's avid investors. And if you read into it, it says people who actively invest their money, follow financial markets, and regularly read financial or business news, which is great, and it's very helpful. But you can also see that there are 10 billion to 1 trillion weekly estimated impressions in just the United States with English as the language alone. That's a lot of impressions, and that's a huge audience. It is helpful that Google gives you a little bit further insight as to how this audience was created. Top related audiences are for commercial properties, whether it's for sale or for rent. Top YouTube categories are financial market news, currencies and foreign exchange, and business news. So it's not giving you everything that leans into this avid investors segment, but it does start to give you a little bit of background of how they came up with that specific audience. If the financial section is what you want to target, but this seems too broad, there are some different, more specific targeting options that we'll get to in a little bit, but this is going to be the highest level of targeting that we can utilize around affinity audiences. There are a number of other segments for beauty and wellness, food and dining, shoppers, news and politics, travel, lots of different segments in here. But obviously you can see there are only a handful of them to kind of start off with. There's maybe 15 available. And then they each have a couple of subsegments, but this is going to be a very high level set of interest targeting around how we can reach users. I would probably suggest if you're trying to have really performance driven marketing, affinity audiences might be something that you want to layer into additional targets, but they're probably best suited for a larger play at some sort of brand awareness, introducing your brand to new users, or having some higher funnel call to action that's a little bit lighter, because these users, again, are in a very broad audience and have high affinity for the topics that are here. But again, these topics are still relatively broad. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking about using affinity audiences. Now let's hop back and take a look at the next option. This is where we're going to get a little bit more specific on some of these same types of interests that are in the affinity audience section. We're going to start looking at what users are actively researching or planning, and that's going to be in-market and life events. So let's open up this option, and we've got two different sets here. We're going to start with in-market, and these are people who are actively researching or planning a specific purchase or change, something along those lines. So if I open this up, now we'll start to see that some of these feel similar to affinity audiences: apparel and accessories, auto and vehicle, beauty and personal care. But There are a lot more options to start off with. I'm not going to read all of these. That would take way too long. You can see travel down at the bottom as well. But if we come back up, I want to compare to the financial services, because you'll remember we only really had 2 options in the Affinity Audiences. But if we come into financial services, now we're starting to see a lot more options available. We've got everything from banking services, credit and lending, financial planning, insurance, investment services, and tax preparation services and software. But even within that, you can see that underneath financial planning, you can also choose estate planning or retirement planning. Banking services has debit and checking services and savings accounts. There are lots of different targeting options available in here, and if you hover over, it'll show you the same types of things here. People interested in opening a new savings account. This only has 1 billion to 5 billion impressions per week, which is quite a lot less than the 10 billion to 1 trillion impressions that the avid investors did. And you can start to see that the top related audiences and YouTube categories are much more specific. Home equity loans, student loans, retirement planning, or people actively looking on YouTube for savings accounts, funds, retirement and pension. Lots of different options here. So if you're trying to reach somebody who's actively researching or planning either making a purchase or making some type of life change like opening a savings account, in-market audiences can be a great way to do that. You'll kind of cut down on some of the fat that's from the Affinity Audiences, reaching users who are actively trying to read content or do Google searches around these different actions. But if you'll remember, there was one other option available in this section, and that's going to be the life events. So let's close up the in-market section. And now let's open up life events. Some of these are going to feel somewhat similar to the demographic information, but these are going to be focused on people who are making some form of change. We're trying to reach somebody who's in a transitional period on the Google Display Network. So the first option here you can see is business creation. This is going to let you target people who recently started a business or are starting a business soon based on the actions they're taking around the Google Display Network. You'll notice that a lot of these other ones also feel like they are life-changing events, either college graduation because you just graduated, you got a new job. Marriage would lean into some of the marital status, but if you'll notice here, it's going to be somebody who's getting married soon or recently married. It's not just are they married or not, like some of the other targeting options were in the demographic section. Same thing with moving, purchasing a home, retirement. All of these different options are focused on users' life events and when they're going from one stage to another. So if you have a business that's trying to target users who are in these transitional phases, life events can be a really strong way to get in front of them. Make sure that you're reaching them at the right point in their decision process and in that transition, and introduce your brand to them and hopefully let them become a customer. Transitioning out of the different preset audiences that we have here, the last 3 options that we have available here are going to be based on different types of audiences rather than just the preset checkboxes that Google has. So remember, everything in these top 3, you're going to be able to check a box and opt into an audience that Google has already created for you. In the 3 options down here, you're going to be able to create your own audiences based on either your website visits, combining some of the options at the top, or creating a completely new audience based on user behavior that you're trying to target. Let's start with creating audiences based on remarketing and similar audiences. These are going to be the users that we're targeting based on how they've interacted with your business. So if we check into this section here, you can see that we have 3 different options available. Depending on what audiences you already have created in your account, this list will look different. This is a placeholder account for us. We don't have tons going on, but you can start to see some of the lists that we have. First I want to look at is YouTube users. As paid media pros, we have the YouTube channel. We have anything from users who've seen a video in the past 540 days to a similar audience of the users who've seen a video in the past 540 days. So any of your YouTube lists are going to pop up here. Same thing with any website visitors. I'm not going to open this up, but anybody who's been to your website and you created an audience off of those users in the Audiences Manager in Google Ads will show up available here if it is eligible to be advertised to on the Google Display Network. So remember, not all audiences are available for the Google Display Network, so only those that are available will show up here. And there's also the different combined lists that we have available. So anything that is going to be kind of in these different combined sections will also show up here. So between these and any other segment that you see here, you're able to retarget users on the Google Display Network depending on how they've already interacted with your business. Jumping back a little bit, now we can start to look at combined audiences, and think of combined audiences as I teased a little bit earlier. These are going to be any intersection of the different audiences that we have up here at the top. So let's come in here and start to look at how combined audiences can work. We don't have any created yet for this channel, so we're going to create a new combined audience. Here we can start to get really customized with how we're trying to reach users. Let's say we're trying to reach somebody who is interested in finances and also recently graduated from college, and we only want somebody who's in both of those camps. We don't want just anybody who graduated from college, and we don't want just anybody who's interested in finance, but the intersection of the two. So we can come up here, and in this first section, we can type in something around finances. You can see here that a number of the audiences that we looked at a little bit earlier are popping up. So in that affinity section, there's the avid investors, or the parent audience of that, banking and finance. Or if we scroll down a little bit, we have some of the in-market audiences available here as well. So let's go ahead and just choose a couple of these in-market audiences just to get them added to the list. Now that we have those added in, we want to try and layer in the option around the college graduate. So we want to come down here to narrow your audience so we can focus on just those same users. Now we have the same box that pops up down below. And again, this is going to look just like it did when we first hopped into that audiences section. It's already got some preset options here. We can type something in and search just like I did a second ago, or we can go to the browse option and it'll open up all of those same lists. So if I already know where it is, I can just go to life events, come over here, college graduation, and graduating soon and recently graduated both work for me, so I can add those in. And now I have a custom audience of users who are interested in the financial services and investment services in market audience. They've been actively researching or planning something around that, and must also match any of the audiences of users who are graduating soon or are recently graduated. If we wanted to, we also could exclude some specific users. So if we know that we don't want somebody who fits into a certain life event, in market audience, affinity audience, anything like that, you can click exclude down here. The same box will pop up and allow you to operate it in the same way. But for right now, I'm just going to click create. And because I gave the audience name of example, that's what's going to show up here. And if I hover over it, you'll see that Google estimates that I'll get 100 million to 500 million impressions per week in the US with the English targeting setting on display. So it's much smaller than a lot of the other audiences that we've looked at because I made such a specific cross-section of the two. For now, I'm going to go ahead and uncheck this and hop into the last audience section that we have here, which is going to be custom audiences. And these are one of my favorite ways to target users on Google. So let's go ahead and come in here. And now these are a combination of custom intent audiences and custom affinity audiences. So if you've used those in the past, Google has merged those two to create this new custom audience option. We have a few examples from previous videos, but for now, I'm just going to click create new custom audience down here at the bottom. In the audience creation window, you'll see that it starts you off with two preset options here. The first is chosen by default, and it's people with any of these interests or purchase intentions. The second is a little bit more specific. It says people who searched for any of these terms on Google. But there's a little caveat down below that we need to pay attention to, especially for the sake of this video. Only campaigns running on Google properties will utilize this type of search retargeting behavior. On other campaigns, terms will be used as interest or purchase intentions, or defaulting back to the first option that you can see chosen here. Since the Google Display Network is running mostly on other websites, apps, different placements that are outside of the Google network, if you create a custom audience, it's going to default to this type of interests and purchase intentions usage. It's going to be very similar to a keyword type of targeting, which we'll talk about here in a minute, but that doesn't mean that you can't utilize custom audiences that have been built before. If you already have some examples like you saw that we do in this account, we utilize those for YouTube because that's a Google-owned property and it would effectively be targeting people based on those search terms on Google, but we can use that same audience on the GDN. It's just only going to target based on interest or purchase intentions. So when you're creating a custom audience, if you're only going to use it for the Google Display Network and nowhere else, you can probably just leave it as this first option here. But if you plan on potentially testing this custom audience on YouTube or Google Discovery, Gmail, any of those additional Google properties, I suggest you choose the second option down below to target based on search terms so that when you are on a Google property, you can leverage that set of intent. Down below, you can also see that there are ways that you can customize this audience based on people who browsed certain types of websites, certain types of apps, or people who visited certain places. So there are a lot of sets of customization you can use in this custom audience. So dig through each of those, see what makes the most sense for you, and put together a great audience to use on the Google Display Network. So we've already covered every one of the targeting options that lives under the people setting. So these are based on who we want to reach. Now let's jump into the second option, which is going to be based on where your ads show, or contextual or content targeting. You can see here that we can narrow your reach within keywords, topics, or placements. And I think that Google makes these a little bit tougher to show just because they don't love it when you target people based on this type of thing. So you need to come down here to content targeting. And then from the very top, you need to choose how you want to target people. We've got the three options I mentioned first. Keywords is going to be the first one, and it says choose terms related to your products or services to target relevant websites. So let's click that. And the first thing you'll see here is that Google really wants you to try those custom audiences. And to be quite honest, for the most part, I would follow that advice. I think custom audiences work best, and I think that keyword targeting can be very broad, but I do still want to go through it for some of those users who might want to do it. So for right now, I'm just going to click Not Now, because we're going to talk about keywords specifically. So if I scroll down a little bit so we can see this whole window, you'll notice that Google still wants you to utilize those custom audiences, so they're very keen on that. But effectively, you would try to target users in the same way that you could on search, but it's going to be much more broad than it would be on search. There are no match types on the Google Display Network, so everything you type in does not need to have any sort of brackets, quotes, or plus signs in front of it. And you can add in keywords in a few different ways. The first is simply to check into this box and start typing and add in one keyword per line. That part's pretty self-explanatory. You can also get keyword suggestions based on what Google can provide. So you can either enter your product or service in this field here, or you can do what I'm going to do for this example and just type in your website, and Google will come up with a number of different examples for you. I just typed in paidmediapros.com, and all of the keywords have some instance of advertising, digital ads, website advertising, all of these different things here. So you can either add these one by just clicking the plus button here, or you can come down to add all ideas, and they'll all show up in the left-hand box. And you can see that on the right, it's recalculating the number of impressions we expect to get. Without any targeting options, Google is always going to show that impressions number as 10 billion plus. Since I added these keywords in, you can see that it's going to be 500 million or less, because this is a relatively specific type of targeting. The last thing with the keyword settings you can have down here, it's actually going away. Google is kind of getting rid of this. It allows you to utilize either the content, so only show ads on websites, apps, and videos related to these keywords, or it has the audience option here that says show ads to people likely to be interested in these keywords, and also on web pages, apps, and videos related to these keywords. This is grayed out because the custom audiences that Google teased at the beginning of this keyword section is how you would reach this type of user. For now, I'm going to go ahead and just delete all of these so we don't have the limited audience section on the side. The next content targeting option we have is going to be topics. This is going to feed much closer into the types of audiences that we saw above, because these are going to be based on a preset list of topics that Google has available. This is where you can choose topics to target many web pages, apps, and videos around a certain subject. This is going to be somewhat similar to an in-market audience. A lot of the topic names are going to look very similar to the in-market audience names, so just make sure that you know whether you're looking at topics or in-market, because here, rather than targeting the user who is actively researching, this is almost more of trying to target the web pages that they would be researching on. So when we come down here to finance, which is the example that we've been using the whole time, you can see a number of these options are going to be the same. We still have accounting and auditing, banking, credit and lending, financial planning and management, insurance, investing, all of these different preset options. And if we want to look into these, we can get a lot more specific around the types of pages that people are on. Now we've got things into brokerages and day trading, derivatives, specific funds that we can jump into, which are around ETFs or exchange traded funds, hedge funds, mutual funds. There's a lot of different types of options that you can have here for the financial section, because we're getting into more the breakdown of the content itself rather than the interests of the users who are in it. Topics are a great option if you're trying to reach a specific user when they're looking at certain content based on these preset buckets. Maybe you're trying to sell your services to somebody who's trying to do DIY finance. You're trying to say, hey, we're a full service financial firm. Let us do your trading for you instead of you trying to figure out how to do it yourself. You can also think about these as a way to do a complement or a substitute type of product. So just think about what types of content you want your user to be looking at when they are introduced to your brand, product, or service. For now, I'm going to close this up and we'll talk about the last type of content targeting, which is going to be placements. This will be the most specific type of targeting that we have on the Google Display Network. We're able to target based on the individual placements that people are trying to view content. For this entire video, we've been going through the different examples of targeting, and I keep going back to finance. So let's stick with this for this placement targeting option. Let's say we want to target people on specific websites that are around finance. So we can come into this section, come up here to a search, and type in a website that we know is about finance. So I typed in NerdWallet because I know it's about trying to make financial decisions and choosing the right credit card, all that sort of thing. And now you can see all of the different options that Google is suggesting would be a good placement to show on that are similar to NerdWallet. You'll see that NerdWallet is not part of the list that's here, at least not up at the top, because we're probably not going to get a Google display ad to show on there. They probably have something else, but there are a lot of different other options that we have here. And if you want to add any of these websites for ApplyNowCredit.com, which I don't know about that, but you can add that by just checking the box next to it and it'll show up on the side, and then you get a completely new set of impression counts, so 190,000 or less a week. So as you can tell now that I'm talking about thousands, this is going to be a very specific type of targeting, and the impressions that you're going to get are going to be much lower. For now, I'll just clear this out. But when you're looking for placement targeting, it's beneficial to make sure you have a handful of different seed websites that you want to start with. I have NerdWallet here, but there are a number of different other ones I could type in to try and get new placement suggestions to show up to make sure that I'm reaching a wide enough audience. In a similar fashion, we can do the same sort of thing for YouTube. But one thing I do want to show you is that since NerdWallet is still my suggestion up here, it is going to filter for the number of different options that I have down below. So you can see here 313, that was the number of suggested websites it had in that placement section earlier. There's also 4 YouTube channels it suggests. There's 1,000 plus YouTube videos, and there's almost 500 apps that it suggests. So let's go ahead and go into YouTube. And here you can see there are the 4 that are going to show up that it thinks are a good option here. So this is going to be what it looks like when you type in basically anything. You can type in just nerdwallet.com, you could type in finance, credit cards, whatever, and Google's going to show you the suggested YouTube channels that you might want to show on. The same thing will happen for YouTube videos. So instead of showing you specific channels, it's going to show you individual videos that you could show up next to. Now, one thing I do want to call out that Joe has mentioned in his videos, there are some specific strategies you need to employ for YouTube placement targeting, and there are some nuances that you need to pay attention to make sure that your ads are showing exactly where you want them to. Rather than go into that right now, I'm going to let you check out at the top of the screen here the video that Joe has put together on YouTube placement targeting. I definitely suggest you check that out if this seems like a good option, because there are some things that might get you a little bit tripped up and might end up having your ads show on placements that you didn't intend on YouTube. So check that video out and see what Joe has to say about it. The next section we have here is around specific apps. So whether they're on Android, Apple, whatever it is, there are a number of apps that you can show up in to make sure that you're trying to find the right users. So again, a lot of these have to do with credit cards, but you can type in specific apps if you want to. Or let's just say I want to look for Calm, the meditation app. If I type that in, now you can see that there are a number of them that are similar that are showing up here that will help us try and reach users who are also trying to meditate, whether it's just for the music or actual meditation and mindfulness practices. There are a lot of different options that we have here as well. So I'm going to hop back out of this, and you'll see here there are a number of different websites, YouTube channels, and videos suggested. The last thing we can do is choose based on an app category. And for that, I'm going to ditch the Calm that I have up here. You'll see now that app categories has 141 listed. So if I check on that, come in and we can see that there are some for Windows Phone apps that are already available. You can just check the box, or you can break them down by Apple App Store or Google Play Store. And there are 56 in Google, 84 in Apple. So I can just check down here and we'll start to open things up that looks pretty similar to kind of the Affinity Audiences that we have, but just based on the app category that's available. So medical, health and fitness, finance, dating, lots of different options that are available, and they're going to be relatively similar for the Apple App Store as well. So if you're not as specific about which apps you want to show up next to, but you want to target people on apps that are trying to be sort of in a little bit of like a blend of the topics and in-market and affinity audiences, this is probably the best way to go to target people on the right types of apps throughout the app stores. There is one last targeting option that you can have on the Google Display Network, but it doesn't fit into the user or content types of targeting, but I do need to have something chosen to utilize that. So I'm going to come up here and just choose a topic just so we have something available. So I'm just going to do auto and vehicle. Now I'll close this back up. You can see that we've got 4.5 billion estimated weekly impressions for just this section alone. The last targeting option that I want to talk about is really just based on machine learning, and it's this targeting expansion. And what Google describes it as reach more users by letting Google look for high-performing audiences similar to your target. Expanding reach can increase impressions, clicks, and conversions. So effectively what Google is saying here is go set up all of your different targeting options and then let us use this option to reach users outside of those targeting options that we think are similar to those users. This is going to be Google's option, sort of like the similar audiences that they have based on your remarketing, or kind of in the same way that Facebook has lookalike audiences based off of your seed audiences as well. Depending on how far you want to grant Google, you can move this little toggle, and each time you do it, you can see that this impression count of added impressions will go up. If you move it towards more reach, we went from 400 million to 1 billion on that last one, and we can go all the way back down to off, which will add 0 impressions on top of our targeting. My suggestion for this setting is that it can be useful, but be careful with it. First of all, Google will almost invariably start you off by default, if you'll remember when I first scrolled down here, to this first level of expansion beyond your targeting options. And it's adding 110 million estimated impressions per week just because it's expanding the targeting options of my auto and vehicle topic that I have chosen above. So just know Google is pretty much going to start you off with this first level of expansion. The way that I use this is that I almost invariably start with it off. I turn it off every single time, and I let my targeting options run for a little bit first without any Google interference, expansion, machine learning added onto it, because I want to see how those targeting options work first. If I start to see good performance and I don't have other sections I want to go into, let's say I don't have any more topics to expand into, I've already created all the custom audiences and I've layered all of my different combinations, and I've just run out of targeting options that I can set up using all of the different options that we just talked about, whether it was based on audience or content, then I will look into maybe flipping the switch and expanding reach just a little bit on some of my top performing audiences. And I'll usually go in, and the first thing I'll do is I'll put it up just one notch. I'll let it run for a little bit, see how it performs. If I do get more volume and my performance at least stays the same, I might go ahead and bump it up another notch, or I'll just leave it where it is and see how it performs kind of ongoing, because I might have enough volume that I want. But I would not start off just giving Google carte blanche and letting them reach everybody that it possibly can. Make sure that you're trying to see the performance from those audiences before you let Google expand. Overall, I think from this video it's clear that there are lots of different targeting options that we can utilize on the Google Display Network. My biggest advice for you is to always make sure that you're paying attention to both the user and the content side of the relationship when somebody is browsing on the Google Display Network. How can you lean into what you know about the user? How can you pay attention to what they're researching when they're on the web and utilize those to your advantage to make sure that you're delivering the right ad to the right user in the right mindset to have the best chance of generating new business from that display ad. Thanks for watching our video. If you thought it was useful, give us a thumbs up below.
We release a new video at least once a week, so if you want to get notified of when a new one comes out, be sure to subscribe to the Paid Media Pros channel.